It's Steam Next Fest Summer 2023 and I'm taking a look at puzzle games to see what tickles my pickle. Everything goes onto my wish list before I play the demo, and then if I like it, it stays on there. If I don't, it comes off. We're kicking off with word Factori, and this is definitely staying on my wish list because I found this engrossing and oddly satisfying to play. It's an automation game, so you start off with the letter I in a factory, and then it asks you to start creating other letters and then eventually other words and getting more complicated as the game goes on. So if you need to make the letter C, what you have to do is put the letter I through like a bendy factory to bend it round. Then you might need to rotate it slightly. Then if you need to make the letter O, then you'll need to do two of those, have one rotate one way, one rotate the other. Then you've got like two curvy eyes, which you'll then need to put into a joiner factory to join them together to make the O. This is all around efficiency, making sure that the factories are as quick and well planned out as possible, because you're then judged against everyone else that's played the game once the level is finished on efficiency, whether or not you've got blockages in your production lines as they go through, and how quickly things are being shipped out. So yeah, really interesting, engrossing. I could see myself fiddling around with this for hours, and yeah, thumbs up from me. The next game is called Viewfinder, and this has been on my to-play list since the demo was announced and the actual game was announced, because my brain can't wrap around how this game does what it does. You're in a digital environment, trying to locate various different transporters and then getting them and transporting to other areas in the world, uncovering a weird story as you go. But because the world is fractured, what you're doing is picking up 2D photographs, placing them in areas where you think they might help you, and then it 3D prints the photo out in the real world that you're in for you to then traverse through. So the way our puzzles work in this game is, say you'll come up to a gate that's closed and you can't get round it. So you'll find a photo that's got an arch that you can walk through, put it up in front of you, and then it will 3D print through the gate and make the arch now clear. Quite often these will be black and white photos, so you'll be able to really see what you've done, but it's really like blown out into 3D. So the background is like hovering in the middle of the sky, but the actual place that you can walk through is something you can tangibly do. This then does other things like building bridges from photos of bridges where you could walk over, or rotating around buildings in a way that means that you can use them as like slopes up from one platform to another. Really crazy. It pays to be a bit weird with how your puzzle solutions could be, because the game is such a free-for-all that you can just go nuts with it and go experimental and see how you could break the game to make it work for you. And yeah, my mind was blown, and this will be a day one for me. The next game on this list is Spirit Swap Lo-Fi Beats to Match 3-2, and the jury's out for me on this one. It's partly a visual novel dating sim, which is fine, but I played with the Match 3 portion of the demo, and I love the graphics, I love the music, I love the vibe and the way how it just feels. But what I didn't like about it is that you can only match things horizontally and not vertically. And so what this was making me do was wait for things to be able to be matched. And I could quite often find myself just stuck in situations where I was like, nothing is movable. So it just felt like more the luck of the draw than it should be. That also combined with the fact that the garbage blocks that you throw to the other side were really huge for what you were doing. So I was just confused in general as to the balancing of this game. And it meant that each round lasted about 15 to 20 seconds. Occasionally I would get one that would last 45, and that was it. So it just felt too bitty and too randomised and unbalanced enough so that skill didn't really matter so much with Spirit Swap for me to really feel too invested. It stayed on my wish list for now because I did like the vibe for it, but I would be an advocate for some rebalancing so that the games last a bit longer for me to really be invested to buy it. Next up is Befuddle, the Bewitching puzzle party game, and I'm sorry in advance for how poor the gameplay will look on this, because this was a game that had to make me think so much. The idea behind this is that someone's got confused about what everything's called in the world because their magic spell's gone wrong and it's befuddled them. So when they're looking at, say, movie titles, instead of thinking about Dirty Dancing, it might be called like Blue Jiving or something like that. There's loads and loads of different types of things. There was like superheroes, there was song lyrics, book titles, all of that kind of stuff. You need to be quite pop cultured, I think, to get this game into its full like maximum potential. But you're trying to work out what they're describing, and you get given up to 3 different hints to help you along the way. So it might say like 4 words or first letter N or something like that, just to kind of help you along the way, which was quite cool. I really like the fact that alongside the solo mode, which was what I was playing, there is a Twitch integration mode so that you can play along with your audience, and the standard local multiplayer kind of quiz show battler. So plenty of ways to play. Really difficult though, and quite often you'll kind of go, when you actually get it right. So yeah, expect some eye-rolling moments, but very enjoyable and a pretty cool concept actually, I have to say. Next up is Escape from Mystwood Mansion, and this is an escape room game. Very fun to play. Again, apologies that the gameplay video footage of me is not going to be great because I was sitting there having to really decode stuff. This takes you down to what I would call the base level of what an escape room is. So it's things like picking up books and looking at like colours and codes and unpicking padlocks. There's none of this like magical mysticism. Everything from here felt very grounded in like being able to pull things around, open up drawers, pick locks, look at the bottom of teacups, work out like what codes could be put together. It's based in that kind of reality. So if you enjoyed like the very traditionalist escape room, I think Escape from Mystwood Mansion will very much scratch an itch for you, and it certainly did for me. The next game on this list is called Growth, and I was really confused with this, and I'm not quite sure I got it. You start off with this fog of war island with a couple of bits of forest tile, for example, and inside there will be some deer. Now, in order to uncover the rest of the island, which is what you're trying to do and grow it, you're trying to migrate different animals to different parts of the island. And depending on where you go, you might be able to start up a new forest, you might bump into some bees that might be able to travel across water and therefore start off like pollinating fields, for example. But there was so much luck in where you put things and the order on where you spread out that you can quite easily run dry with animals, because every time you move an animal, it's not being replenished in the forest that you're in. So you need to kind of join things together, which then gives you more animals, but then you spend loads of animals trying to do that. I got stuck quite early with this very often, and tutorial was helpful for me to understand what the general principle of the game was, but it wasn't helpful for me to understand what the best mechanics were once I was then set out and left to my own devices. So yeah, I got a bit confused with this one. I'm still intrigued with it, and it's staying on my wish list for now, and maybe it might click when I go back and play the demo again at another point. But yeah, bit of a hit and miss this one potentially. The next game on my list is The Master's Pupil, and this is a 2D puzzle platformer that's all around hand-drawn paintings. Fantastico Studio does this. This seems to be their USP, is to digitalise real-world paintings into their games and then make a game out of it. And this is by far the most gamiest game that they've done so far. Proper puzzles, a lot of it revolves around colour matching, so you're spray painting your person because you're a piece of paper, and you're being able to unblock paths as you match their colours. Or you're moving around what I took to be either balls of wool or screwed up paper, and blasting them around various different air vents to try and get them to the right place to unblock your path too. A lot of the puzzles in the demo was revolving around moving of like crystal switches to change the airflow so that you could push things or yourself around various different mini mazes. And that's why I'd kind of put this in a puzzle platformer perspective rather than an adventure like 2D platforming perspective, because it was all around that. There's very little in terms of actual platforming for you to do. This is definitely a step up for Fantastico Studio for me, so it stays on my wish list more as a curiosity more than anything else. Next up is Antique Restorer, and I'm going to call this 3D Glass Masquerade because it's shards of various different pottery pieces that you need to kind of put back together again. I really liked the fact that you could scroll on the mouse wheel to automatically pick up the next pieces, and quite often the pieces are scattered around you in rings in a way that means that whatever you've just placed isn't too far away from the next piece that you're given automatically, which was quite cool because you'd be kind of looking not just at a pattern perspective, but also from it highlights where you're placing things perspective, and you could potentially turn that off, but I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, it was really, really fascinatingly engrossing to play, quite relaxing too. And there was 2 different versions of this. So the first one was like a jigsaw in 3D, putting it back together, very Glass Masquerade, very Jigsawian. The second one was called Slicer Mode, and this was where a pottery piece had been sliced vertically all the way down and horizontally. And so what you were doing was it would tell you where roughly the pieces were in like top, middle or bottom, and then you'd need to kind of swap them around constantly to get the pattern right. So it didn't give you defined, yes, this is absolutely where something has to be. I found that mode slightly harder, but and I preferred, actually, I must say, the jigsaw mode, but both are perfectly fine. And yeah, I'll be picking up Antique Restorer because this is one of those relaxing moments that just works really well. Talking of relaxing games that I enjoyed, Maya's Dream is another one that's also a jigsaw puzzle game that I really got into. The idea behind this is that you're building together fragments of dreams to remember your previous memories. So everything's got this like weird glow to it and like warm ambient vibe that the quicker that you lay down jigsaw pieces, the more dramatic and flowing and like emotional the music becomes. But also it starts to get all like twinkly lights and celestial. Really, really enjoyed the theming of this. I also found that Luna the cat, who has been sent to try and help you remember your dreams, whoever's voiced that, my goodness me, you need some anime villain roles in the future. It's ridiculous. It's so over the top. It's like Tim Curry does cats. But it suited the theme really well. And what I quite liked as well is that whenever you complete a jigsaw puzzle, you also get like money in the background, which then allows you to start building out the room that you're solving your dreams in, because the idea is that you're building your life back up again because you've forgotten everything. Really, really cool. Very much enjoyed it. Staying on my wish list quite happily. A game that is staying on my wish list for now is Tacticube, because I had some real problems with this demo, but I like the concept of it, so I'm intrigued to see how it develops. This game is like going around a Rubik's Cube, but as a turn-based battle game. So you don't move necessarily, but loads and loads of other enemies will come and surround you to attack you. You roll dice, and depending on what dice it is that you roll, or the number that you roll, gives you a variety of different moves to choose from. And what you're trying to do is push the other enemies away from you so that you don't get hit, but do it in a way so that they then hit each other and kill each other. The problem that you have with this is that it's really difficult to fully understand exactly what each move was doing. So I ended up wasting moves constantly where I thought something was going to happen and it didn't. I also found that when enemies would hit each other, they didn't necessarily die. So I was like, well, what's the point of doing all of this for anyway? And the fact that you can't move felt like a weird anomaly, at least in the demo. It might change in the actual game itself. So yeah, this felt like a really visually striking game that has some good ideas, but really lacks letting the player know and understand exactly what it is that the outcomes of your actions. And that was the main problem that I had with Tacticube. And if that gets solved, then maybe I'll be able to pick it up and understand it better. But for the now, Tacticube is kind of staying on my wish list for the time being, but it's absolutely not going to be a day one purchase for me. The next game up is Billy Bumbum. What a name! And I really enjoyed this. This is a rolling cube style game where you've got to make sure that everything fits in the right slot by rolling your bum into the end square so that you can magically fart your way out of it. I'm not making this up. This is genuinely the game. And it's really well put together. So what I downloaded as a ha-ha, actually I proper enjoyed. Love the aesthetic, really cute vibe, great music as well, graphical design on point. But the puzzles were great too, because you'd have like evil enemies that were shooting laser beams at you, and unless it shoots into your bum so that you can shoot it back at them and shut them down, it kills you. Similarly, you've got like blocks that you can push around, and then it'll either form walls if it hits another wall, or it might fall off the edge of the world and become a new path so that you're building the world out around you. And as soon as you touch a block, when you move off it, it's had a piece of damage. So if it's only on a 1 point scale, then it will fall and break away. But some blocks will have multiple touch points and will kind of decrease as you go. So really, really fun, really enjoyable. Didn't expect it, absolutely staying on my wish list, and I'll definitely pick it up. Freeway Fiasco is an interesting game too, and again, I'll be keeping this on my wish list because the idea behind this is that you're trying to transport loads and loads of souls to hell, but you're doing it via traffic. Oh yes. And so you take it in turns, trying to get each car from its starting point to its end point, depending on what colour it is and where that end point is relating to its colour. However, of course, once you've got one car on the move, you need to make sure the other one doesn't crash into it, so you'll be looping around trying to work out how to keep everything safe. There's also cop cars in here too, and they will chase you around and cause you problems as well, and they will change colour depending on who they're chasing, which means that sometimes there's gated coloured blocks that might mean that you need 2 purple going through before the green car can get through. So you need to attract the cop car, turn it purple with the purple car, get them both through the gate so that the green one can get through and reach its end point, for example. Really well put together puzzles. I was getting a bit grated on by the announcer, who thinks they're being sassy but actually just comes across like a bit of a wanker. Apart from that though, great game. The next game on this list is my hidden gem, because actually when I was going back on playtime, I spent more time playing this than any other game on this list. It's called Siheyuan, and the idea behind this is that you've got 4 different coloured blocks coming down 4 different ramps at random, and you'll have a pattern around the centre square of 16 blocks that you need to fill in, matching those 4 colours. However, there's multiple things coming down at once, and what you can do is, it might start off on, say, coming from the left hand side, and you press up and down to move it from those 4 rows, but you can keep going and move it off that row, and it rotates around so that you can then move it left and right on the top or bottom row. So you're constantly kind of spinning the whole thing around to make sure that you can put the right thing in the right place, if that makes sense. But it's impossible to do because there's too many coming down at once. So you'll get lots of blocks hitting the wrong places, or you might need to start stacking things up 2 or 3 fold to try and make sure that you're keeping a spot safe. And in order to clear those out, yellow blocks will come down the paths too, and they'll be crucial for you for clearing the way. There's also other rules around like mirrored walls at the edge, so that where you think things will pop out won't necessarily be where they expect, or you can kill things by putting them into like hiding in that wall too. This was crazy and mad. It's a 1 to 4 player game if you want it to be. I only played it in single player, and I'd lost like half an hour easily just getting to grips with the mechanics and loving every minute of it. This will be a day 1 for me, and it's a sleeper hit, and I appreciate it's going to be really niche, but I loved it. The next game on this list is called UFO Unidentified Falling Objects, and I really enjoyed this one too. It places you inside a kind of Tetris style game where you've got blocks falling from the sky, and you need to kind of kick them around so that they can become combos wherever possible. But it's not required, because so long as you're shooting blocks and clearing them away, you can stay alive for as long as possible. But in order to make sure that you don't get caught out by like missiles flying around, or laser beams, or enemies coming to attack you, or just things falling from the sky, or bomb blocks, it's better to kick the blocks around to try and get groups of 2, 3, 4, or up to 10 or whatever it is, because then when you shoot them and they explode, they then leave stars that level up your character. So this is kind of a puzzle game. It's also kind of an arcade game. It felt like Pong meets Lumines, but really, really enjoyable. Loved it loads. Really difficult, and the difficulty curve did ramp up quite quickly after the first few levels, but Very enjoyable, thumbs up from me, day one. And that is my puzzle video. I hope that was informative and interesting. I hope that wasn't too long either for people. But yeah, if you found anything cool, drop it down in the comment below, and thanks for watching. Bye! Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.